Welcome to the Rising Tide Leadership Podcast, where we simplify the complexities of your leadership journey. I'm Scott, and joining me is our go-to leadership guru, Dr. Michael David Morales, known to many as Mo. Have you ever had a teacher who changed the way that you see the world? I'm guessing most of us have, and most of us can think back to that one teacher or maybe a few teachers or professors who have had a profound impact on our lives. But in the movie The Dead Poets Society, John Keating, who's played by none other than Robin Williams, one of my favorite actors and comedians, he embodies the transformative role at this conservative all-boys preparatory school, and it takes place in the late 1950s. So initially, when Williams' character comes in, he's met with resistance from both the school administration and even his own students. They're a lot more accustomed to more of a rigid, traditional approach to education. There's even a scene where one of I think it's the dean of the school, comes in and is teaching the class for the day and asks students to open their books to a certain page, like they're going to read straight from the textbook. So that's what these students are used to. But the Williams character really challenges them to think for themselves and embrace their own passions. He uses poetry as a tool. And he encourages students to question authority and explore their own individuality, which reflects his own journey in discovering a more authentic leadership style. As he fosters kind of this environment that prioritizes creativity and then self-discovery, the Williams character transforms kind of from a more conventional teacher into a transformational leader, inspiring his students to strive for greatness and authenticity. So as a result, as you can imagine, many of his students gain kind of newfound confidence and a desire to pursue their dreams, and some of them are kind of wild and crazy. However, like any good movie has a conflict that erupts, and there's a clash between kind of their aspirations and the school's kind of more conservative values. And this leads to significant changes and ultimately culminates in a tragic consequence for one student. So I'm not going to spoil that part. This is actually, Mo has a top 50. If this fits in Scott's top 50 of movies, probably even my top 5. It's one of my all-time favorites. But ultimately, Williams' character, his journey really highlights how a leader can evolve their style just really to inspire others and show that true leadership is more about encouraging people to seek deeper meaning within their own lives and even face, or I should say even in the face of societal pressures to maybe conform to something different. And so today we're discussing something fundamental to leadership success, and that's finding your own leadership style. And this really is key to being a better leader. And I know we're going to break it down into 3 major points like we do every week. So Mo, where do we start today?
Great opening, Scotty, just like always. Dead Poet Society is definitely one of my favorite movies. Probably not in my top, it's probably my top 50, but man, I would have never known that this is in your top 5. So I'm learning new things about you every day. So that's pretty cool. Great movie, though, if you haven't seen it. It's funny that Scotty had to not give you the spoiler, which is very nice of him. Because I think the movie was like, back in the 90s? So like 40-something years ago?
Yeah. It's been out for quite, man, that is like almost 40 years ago.
Isn't that crazy, dude?
That makes me feel that just makes me feel so old.
Well, we are not spring chickens. So anyway, so let's kick off today and talking about finding your leadership style with point 1, which is this: personal authenticity. So this is the idea that your leadership style should align with your personality and your values. We talk about values a lot on this show. One of the best ways to lead effectively is by being your true self. And when you lead from a place of authenticity, your team is going to trust you because they're going to know that you're not pretending to be something that you're not. It's not going to be a facade.
I feel like trust is something that we just constantly talk about, and just how critical and just important it is, and just what a key to actually influence trust can be. So do you have one of those examples and just that database of knowledge that you have?
I do. In fact, Daniel Goleman talks about this in his book, True North. So he shares a story of Howard Schultz, the former CEO of Starbucks, who didn't just find his focus on the bottom line, but he wanted to create a culture where employees felt valued, which is pretty incredible. At that point, Schultz kind of went beyond what everybody else in leadership was doing. Most people who were leaders at that time were thinking, how do I create culture within the people that my clients, the people that I'm serving? Schultz took it further, and he didn't build a culture just with the people that went to his shops, which I am one of those, Starbucks drinkers and lovers. But he said, I want to bring this all the way to the employees. And so there's a lot of companies that do that. Schultz did it well, and Starbucks still does that really well. So it was rooted in his experience and his personal mission, which made him want to create the company the way that he did to reflect his values. He was able to do that because he knew his values, and he thought, why don't I just make this company wide? He didn't hide behind the corporate mask, and when he faced tough decisions, he took those head on. He showed vulnerability, and his team respected him for that. And so authentic leadership is what Schultz did, and what it should look like for all of us.
Yeah, I think it'll be really interesting, and almost it'll be interesting to watch from a leadership perspective to see, Starbucks just got a brand new CEO. It's all over the news, big deal, everything. And it'll be really interesting to see how that new CEO potentially changes things to just try to better that environment. And my understanding, he's done a great job at Chipotle. And so a shout out to Chipotle. But it'll be really interesting to kind of see. And I know we've talked about Schultz a lot. So he's such a great example of leadership. But when we think kind of about our own journeys, and we think more about our listeners, and we think about kind of creating our own leadership style, I'm sure there's been times where our listeners, and I know even for myself, there's been times where I see someone, I'm like, man, I want to be that leader. And so it's almost modeling my leadership style after someone else's that might not even be my own. So then how can our leaders then assess the authenticity of their own leadership style? And then what steps can they take to make sure that it aligns more closely with their true selves?
Yeah, that's really important for a leader. And there's a ton of them. And we talk about this all the time in my sessions with different clients. I'm going to give you a couple to consider. And then if you have questions, you can always put them in the comments, and I would love to work some of it out. But here's the first one. You want to learn how to process the things that you are doing as a leader. And so leaders, sometimes we get so focused on the things that we're doing. We're trying to get things done, right? The bottom line, that it's tough to get beyond the bottom line like Schultz did. When you process your leadership style, it is going to make you a better leader. Not just the good stuff in your leadership style, but also the bad stuff, the stuff that you need to change and the stuff that you need to keep. And trust me, there's a lot of stuff that you're doing in your position of leadership, whether you have one person that is relying on you or you have 50 people or more. There are things in your leadership style that are helpful, and there are things that are detrimental. And I like to keep the helpful stuff and try to get rid of some of the detrimental. Now, that's coming from a guy who says, focus on your strengths, don't focus on your weaknesses. But I don't want people to ignore their weaknesses. I want to learn what I can do well, and I want to focus on that. I want to learn what I don't do well, and I want to kind of shift away from that. And so a great way to do this is to find out who are the people that are speaking into your life. I know that I am always looking for men and women who have done life longer than me, better than me, even if they're younger than I am, but they've been in a position of leadership in a specific capacity that I'm trying to learn. I will interview or talk with, or just get to know those people so that I can get better as leaders. So leaders, are you processing the things that you're doing as a leader, both the good and the bad? And the second one would be this, is learn how to adopt a leadership style that is coachable. Are you a coachable person? Sometimes when you are the leader, the higher you get, the less you want to hear the negative. And that's why I started out by saying you've got to process through things. And I'm all about the process. Scott, we talk about that a lot, about the journey. Kevin Cobb has taught me that from a young age, that it's all about the journey. And one thing that I always tell young leaders and old leaders and everybody in between is don't forget the journey for the destination. And so how do we do that? We learn how to be coachable as leaders. And if you're not asking people how you're doing genuinely, I'm not saying go into your team and making a decision saying, hey, did I make the right decision? Because what are they going to say? Of course, they're going to say, yeah, great job, boss. Then they're going to go back to everybody else and be like, dude, this guy's out to lunch. Why is she our leader? Right? Learn how to be coachable. I want to get better every single day of my life. if I want to add value to people, I need to be able to add value to myself. I am always trying to learn. I'm reading new books. I'm listening to new podcasts. Just before we hit record, Scotty, you gave me one of your podcast episodes. You said, Mo, you need to listen to this. And I said, I don't listen to that podcast, but I will. And what did I do? I picked up my phone right there. I put that podcast episode in my queue, and I'm going to listen to it because I know by what we were talking about, specifically about today, you said, hey, this might add some value. I'm going to listen to it. Leaders, are you doing that kind of stuff? Learn how to be coachable. Those are just a couple.
Yeah, two things that popped in my head. You were talking about figuring out what you're good at and what your strengths, your weaknesses are, and take strengths 34. We've talked about it in so many of our podcasts, and I can't stress that enough to our listeners and to our leaders. Don't just take the Clifton strengths, the 5. That's a good start, but take strengths 34. So I've done both. I did the 5 initially, and then Mo really encouraged me to go back and do the strengths 34, and it just opened a whole new world for me. Like you said, showed me what I'm not really the best at, and I found that I was trying to be better at those things rather than refining what I'm already really good at and then getting the right people on the bus to fill in those other spaces. So to our listeners, our leaders, take that Gallup Strengths 34. Do it. And then the other thing that kind of popped in my head, you talked about, asking people genuinely, how are they doing? And I think one of the things that really goes along with that is not only asking how you're doing, but as a leader, being prepared to respond when they respond to you. So I feel like I've been in so many conversations sometimes where someone asks, like, how are you doing? And I respond and it's like, okay, well, cool. And it's like, all right, well, if you didn't really want to know, like, or you don't want to engage, like, maybe don't have that conversation. So, but as a leader, like, that's such a great opportunity to influence. That's such a great opportunity to coach. And so just being ready to respond in those situations. So Mo, why don't you drive home that second point?
Sure. When we're talking about finding your leadership style, this is point number 2. It's the power of adaptability. While being authentic is definitely crucial, and I think that being authentic is where it's at because nobody wants you to be fake with them. They want you to be real, right? Great leaders also know how to adapt their leadership style based on the situation. So leadership isn't just static, right? It would be really easy. Everybody would do it if knew exactly what was coming. But being in leadership is like being on a boat in the middle of the ocean. Sometimes it's calm, sometimes it's not, but you got to be ready because what works in one situation isn't going to work in another. So if you were in the harbor and your ship started floating away, what would you do? You just throw the anchor down. But if you're in the middle of the ocean, the last thing you want to do when seas get rough is throw your anchor down, right? You got to be able to roll the punches. So you've got to know those situations because the best leaders are flexible enough to recognize those kind of things.
I feel like this is one of the hardest things to do. So there's just so much comfortability in calm and in sameness. And when, like you said, when the seas get rough, that is, and I've got so many times in my life where that are just flashing through my head, but that is some of the most uncomfortable things that people can have to go through, especially as leaders, not only thinking about how to navigate it as yourself, but then also pulling with you those that you're leading. So
I once knew a really fantastic leader with collaboration, consensus building. When emergencies would hit, I'm telling you, this guy would just shift gears quickly. And all of a sudden, it was being directive, being clear, firm instructions, giving everybody the right things and how to align. And I was like, what is going on? And after the crisis, he returned to his regular collaborative approach. And so his ability to adapt to the moment ended up saving the team a lot of the times during those rough times. And I have not met a lot of leaders who can do that. It can be one way, and it's not fake when it comes to something new. It's just he knew in those instances that based on his specific team and the things that they were dealing with, that he had to take the bull by the horns, and his team appreciated it. And they didn't get all upset because he was all of a sudden just taking everything away and all the decision making. He knew that in those parts of the process, his team was expecting him to lead a certain way, and he adapted to that. And I can tell you this because I still know the guy, and he's had several different teams over the years, and he doesn't deal with all those teams the same that he did with that one particular team. Sometimes he stays collaborative. Sometimes he gives away some of the power. But when crisis hits, this guy knows what to do. So my question for leaders today is, when crisis hits, do you know what to do? Do you know how to treat situations differently? Because your people are expecting you to know how to lead when crisis hits.
Yeah, so it's almost like clothes shopping in a way, where you are looking for something that fits the situation. So, or like getting ready for work, right? Like you're staring at your closet, you're looking, okay, what is going to be utilized best at work today in whatever situation. So it's not necessarily about sticking to one specific style, because nobody wants to wear a plain white t-shirt every single day, because, if it's, National Red Paint Day, that's a bad idea. But it's more about kind of being flexible depending on the need. So adapting that style.
It really does. And so adapting doesn't mean that you just abandon your core leadership style. That's not what I'm saying. I'm saying because you know your leadership style, you recognize when you need to step up and be decisive, for instance, like this guy did, or when to step back and let your team lead, or somewhere in between. So how do I lead when crisis hits? Crisis doesn't mean like the building's falling down or it's on fire. It could be something as small as missing a deadline or being out of paper. If you're a paper company, if you're, Dunder Mifflin or whatever it is. But when those crises, big or small, come, are you ready to make decisions and to bring your team in an effective way?
I feel like that's so critical. So then, Mo, what about a specific experience from your own leadership journey where that adaptability was tested?
Where do I start? In everything that I've ever done, in every situation, in every place that I've led, I've had to make decisions based on whatever the situation is. And as a swimming and diving coach for pretty much my entire adult life, when I get in situations where somebody fails at holding team values, I never give ultimatums, because as soon as you give an ultimatum, then all of a sudden you need to stick to that ultimatum, or else you're going to lose credibility, right? But what happens when you hear a story and you think, oh, I'm going to nip it in the bud and I'm going to stop the bleeding. We're going to plug up the hole so the whole ship doesn't sink. And then you start making decisions, and then you find out that wasn't the whole story, because there's your side, there's my side, and then there's the truth. And we're all probably, hopefully, somewhere around it. But people usually have their best interest in mind. And in this case, with the young people, the student athletes that I deal with, things come to light. And so every time I sit down with somebody, one of my student athletes, I always give them the benefit of the doubt. And so I'll say, hey, this is what I'm hearing. Can you shed some light on it? Give me your side of the story. And they do. And I'll tell you this, Scott, a lot of times what I was going to do based on the information that I had usually doesn't happen, because I have to adapt to the situation. If I start giving ultimatums and I say, well, I'm going to kick you off the team if X, Y, and Z, well, X, Y, and Z might be very different in each circumstance. So why am I going to do that? I reserve the right as the leader to make those decisions as I see fit. So I'll give you one of my favorite stories. And this is when I was a high school coach years ago. There was a kid who broke team policy, and it was a getting kicked off the team offense. Everybody knew it. Everybody knew what was coming. And so this kid violated team policy on the weekend, and I didn't see him until that next week. And so when he came on deck, he already knew. And I said, what are you doing here? And he's like, what do you mean, what am I doing here? I'm here to practice. And I said, well, as far as I'm concerned, you quit the team this weekend. And he got all defensive, and he was like, oh, come on, are you serious? And I said, hey, that's team policy. What would you do if you were me in this situation? But here's the thing. I said, all right, you know what? If you feel like I'm being unfair, I'm going to take this to the team captains, and I'm going to let them help me make this decision. I went to the team captains and I said, look, here's a situation you guys already kind of know, because you're student athletes as well. And so you already knew what was going. They were all waiting for me to make the decision. And I told them this. I said, I'm going to let you make the decision. Now, when you make the decision, I'm going to own the decision, because the buck stops with me. But you are going to make the decision. You're going to tell me. Talk about real life leadership, having to grow in your leadership as a 16 or 17-year-old and make a decision. They I told him, I said, you have 3 days to make this decision because I need to know by Friday. And I said, I'll tell you this much. If this kid stays on the team, people are going to be upset and they're going to say, Mo, why did you make this decision? And they know that you're part of the process. So, but I'm willing to eat that, But if you choose the other way and he is not on the team anymore, I'm also going to own that decision. And I'm probably going to have to deal
Yeah.
with the parents and all this other a bunch of flack. I won't tell you what the decision was. I'll save that for another time, but I'll tell you this. My captains, they adapted to that situation and they took themselves out of, as just being student athletes, and they started really functioning as true leaders. And at the end of that decision-making process, when we came together, they told me, well, first of all, how hard it was to come to that decision. And then they made the decision and we went forward. Everybody, especially their teammates, saw that their peers who were their leaders really were in a position to make important decisions and that they made a great decision. So I'm still proud of them to this day. They know that, and I hope they're listening.
Yeah, I hope they're listening too, man. Just what a good opportunity to just feed into people. All right, Mo, I know we got one final point today, so let's go ahead and jump into that last point.
Yeah, leaders, when you want to find your leadership style, our last point for today is performance amplification. When you've defined your leadership style and you've learned how to adapt, now you're going to see the impact on your team's performance. An exemplary leadership approach is going to help them perform at their very best. So this isn't just about you, it's about how to help others succeed.
So then, like all things, can you provide us with some sort of real world example to just better connect back to this last point?
Yeah, absolutely. So again, I had a colleague and he was a transformational leader. I mean, great guy, still learn a lot from him today, but he didn't just manage tasks when I knew him, nor does he now, but he also inspired people and still does to think bigger and to take ownership of their work. So by encouraging creativity and empowering his team, this guy continually makes significant shifts in productivity. I'm telling you, out of all the leaders that I know, this guy can really get people to do things and go above and beyond. And so he really knows how to engage his team. He knows how to make performance just go up by leaps and bounds. I have these conversations with this guy and I say, how do you get your people to do that? How do you get your people to amplify their performance? It's because he's adaptable. It's because he knows who he is. And it's because he knows that because he's got both of those pieces to the equation, he knows how much he can ask of somebody. It kind of goes also like as somebody who's coached student athletes my entire life is part of being a leader, part of being a coach is helping kids do more than they think they can. It's when they say, Coach, I can't do that anymore. Like, this is crazy. You really got to help them understand because it's your job. Leaders, are you helping your team get to the next level? Not just as a team, but also personally, person to person. You should be going to each cubicle and talking to your people and getting to know them on a daily basis. You want to become a transformational leader, meaning you're not just giving leadership, but you're living leadership and you're learning leadership on a daily basis. So learn how to do that and lead and be adaptable to your team's needs so that you can make them better.
And it's just kind of seems like you can have such a greater impact with just really figuring out and defining what your leadership style is. And that's just so great. And just really what great insights that we've had today. As we wrap up, Mo, what would you say kind of your final thoughts for today are?
Start by understanding who you are as a leader. You have to know your strengths. You have to align those strengths with your personality, and then you have to be ready to adapt. When you get to that place, then your people are going to be ready to jump on board because remember, your people aren't going to buy into your vision and the things that you want to do until they buy into who you are as a leader. And the way you do that is by defining your leadership style so the people that you lead, they don't have to guess.
Yeah, I really love that everyone just has the potential to find and develop their own really just unique leadership style. And today's discussion was just such a great starting point, I feel like, for our leaders. Like, it's a great kickoff. And just especially for those who might not have ever kind of really thought what their own individual style just looks like. So as we head out, big thanks to all of our listeners for tuning in. If you enjoyed today's episode, please rate, review, and subscribe. We love when you guys do that. Connect with us on Instagram, Facebook, YouTube, and or head over to our website, which is rtclc.com. Your feedback helps us get connect with more and more leaders and just bring valuable insight to them. So until next time, lead with purpose and stay authentic.